learners, I welcome you all to the 9th lecture for the course on International Investment Law and the Environment. In this lecture, we will be looking at the challenges that were posed to the protection of foreign investment. So, we saw that there were many strategies that the capital exporting countries employed in order to afford protection to the foreign investment made by their nationals in some other territories. And then around 19th century, we could see there were many challenges that were made to this protection standards which the capital exporting countries were trying to enforce. So what we are going to see is we're going to focus on what are the challenges that the protection standards faced, the protection standards that the capital exporting countries wanted to cement, that how there was a dent to these protection standards. That is what we're going to see in the initial few lectures of the second week, and eventually we will move on to the discussions that happened in at the international level, be it through international conferences or in international organizations. Then I will end this week by talking about how regulating foreign investment became a norm. So earlier we did see that there were adverse measures that were taken to foreign investment, and mostly it was in the form of nationalization or expropriation. So towards the end of this week, we will be talking about from expropriation to regulation, how that shift had happened. Then next week onwards, the third week onwards, the fourth week onwards, we will be looking at the practice of signing BIT, what are the investment protection standards that are given in the BIT and all of that. So in the third week, this is what is going to be the focus, that what are the challenges that were posed to the capital exporting countries when they were trying to spread the international property rules, right? Okay, so in this lecture, the structure of this lecture will be like this. In the first segment, I'll be talking about generally with regard to the challenges, and then from the second segment onwards, we'll be looking at particular instances. We will be looking at the Soviet reforms, we'll be looking at the Mexican reforms, we'll be looking at the Turkish reforms. Then in the final segment, all other smaller reforms that had happened, especially in the context of Eastern European countries, Bolivia and all of those, that we will discuss in the last segment. So when I say reforms basically means that domestically there were some reforms which also challenged the protection that is given to foreign investment, right? So that is why when I have titled this lecture as Challenges to the Protection of a Foreign Investment. Okay, so without further ado, let's go into the first segment of this video. So in the first segment, we're going to discuss about the general introduction to the challenges that are challenges to protection given to foreign investment. What we see here is around 19th century, by that time, like I've discussed in the previous week, in the previous video, there was a cementing of the protection standards that had happened. So international property rules were, sort of started getting developed, and then the protection that is given to foreign investment was also taking roots. So at this point of time, in the developing countries, there was an era of nationalization. So developing countries, especially newly independent countries, started nationalizing the foreign investment, especially made by the nationals of their colonial masters, right? So they started doing that. And there was rise of nationalism, and there was concept of collective form of ownership and all of those things, which threatened foreign investors and their investment that was made in the host state. So then how did the capital exporting countries address this? In fact, if you see, there's this one scholar, Frederick Katz, K-A-T-S. Frederick Katz had actually stated that the reason why foreign investment faced these adverse measures were because of foreign investment. I was like, what is he saying? Because he was talking in the context of Mexico. He stated that with the flow of capital into Mexico, what had happened was there was economic development in Mexico. When there was economic development in Mexico, it was easier for the government to organize, maintain an army, maintain a police, maintain an efficient bureaucracy, which subsequently led them to take some adverse action against foreign investment itself. So he said foreign investment did result in a capacity building in the host state, where they were in a position now to take measures against foreign investment itself. But Charles Lipson actually gives a better idea as to why that thereof nationalization started happening. Charles Lipson, what he stated was, foreign investment was a constant reminder of their national dependence, especially in sectors like raw materials, public utilities, agriculture in one crop countries. So Lipson stated that when they took or when they nationalized these foreign investment or took some other adverse measures against the foreign investment, that was a powerful and evocative expression of their sovereign right against other countries, and especially by taking such measures, the host state wanted to reject their subordinate status within an international hierarchy. So this is what Charles Lipson stated, that this was not just merely an economic act, but rather this was countries expressing themselves that they are not subordinate to other countries. In fact, sometimes the host states may also take adverse measures, especially expropriation or nationalization, just to appease the local population as well. So these were the challenges that the protection standards of foreign investment faced, right? So now what we see here is, again the World War happened and all of that. The World War also distorted the flow of foreign capital. What we see here is, after First World War, we see that the flow of capital from Britain to other countries had reduced. In fact, empirically, Charles Lipson had showed that 80% of the loans stayed in England itself, in Britain itself, after World War I in 1934, compared to the data of 1912 and 1913, where 80% of the loans from Britain moved to other countries. This is empirically shown by Charles Lipson, how the World War also affected the flow of capital. And what we see here is, after World War I, whatever investments that were made by Britain investors, it was mostly made in colonies. Even if it was made in colonies, the amount of money that were invested in colonies was significantly reduced when we compare the pre-war data and the post-war data. So the amount also significantly reduced. Now what had happened was, after World War I, all of a sudden United States became an emerging country from where there was the flow of capital went to other countries. So that we could see after World War I, United States emerged as a very significant capital exporting countries, and there were many investors from US who had invested in other countries. Even before the World War, what US wanted to do was, US wanted hegemony in Latin America, but this was not easy because there were constant intervention by European countries, especially espousing the cause of their investors who had invested in Latin America. So US always wanted to, even with Monroe Doctrine, it wanted to subjugate or subordinate European claims. So if we initially that was the stance, but eventually it changed its stance after the Venezuela Revolution. If we see, initially the Secretary of State Hamilton Fish told Germany that Germany should only espouse a cause of its own nationals, but not for the nationals of other European countries. Then when the Venezuela arbitration happened, then the Hague Award in case of Venezuelan bondholders, that Hague Award only gave priority to those bondholders whose country intervened in that matter. So then therefore joint receivership joined the interest of European countries. So now here Roosevelt took a decision that he will assume the responsibility for Caribbean finances. He wanted to prevent European intervention. That is why he took this decision. But this was not an easy decision for the United States, because when United States assumed responsibility for Latin American economic interest and all of that, what we see here is when the Latin American countries were again facing many problems. There were challenges with regard to unstable local government. There were challenges with regard to protecting custom houses from civil war factions, and then there were challenges with regard to unstable financial conditions in these countries. So US sort of took a lot of burden on itself, especially in the climate of uncertainty that prevailed in Latin America. Whatever burdens it had taken, but after World War I, what we see here is United States emerged as a very significant capital exporting country. Maybe Britain's shrunken power, like if we look at Charles Lipson's data, clearly Britain's role as a capital exporting country shrunk after the First World War. So that could have contributed to the fact that the US emerged as a capital exporting country, a leading capital exporting country. So with that, I conclude segment 1. In the next segment, we will look at the Soviet reforms and how did it affect the protection standards that the capital exporting countries were trying to assert in terms of protecting foreign investment. Thank you.